Did you guys know that there's a character in Genshin Impact who has mouths on their hands, like a lamprey, that they use to consume eyes? Okay, it's not official, but she is also a princess. And she's also a character in a book. You know, those things that may hold the secrets of the world in the form of fables and fiction? Vera's Melancholy is the most buck-wild of the books in Genshin Impact. Shattered Halberd and other books all seem more relatable to the world of Teyvat, using familiar names or terms. And while Vera's Melancholy has some of the same motifs of cursed swords, eyeballs, and a princess, it's a complete tone shift because it is a space opera! It's got aliens, you got your demon aliens, there's a galactic empire, even teenage love triangles. Did I mention there's also time travel? And, of course, there's space pirates. You name it. It's basically like a sci-fi isekai. This would be a summary and superficial analysis of Vera's Melancholy, and I may do a follow-up video on some more in-depth discussion. So sit down with a blankie and tea and join us for Genshin Story Time with my breakdown of Vera's Melancholy. Volume 1. Endless Days in an Infinite Void. We meet our teenage protagonist, Vera. Vera is an imaginative girl who is bored of the world she lives in and yearns for fun and excitement. She sighs about her dull country town, Delphi, to her friend Sachi. Now, Sachi is more timid and rule-abiding than Vera and is later described as a bullyable weakling. But going back to Vera, she dreams of worlds across the starry seas. One where gods can grant any wish or prayer, and another rent asunder by an apocalyptic war. Here she mentions 14 Valkyries burning brightly in the conflict, which could be a reference to Honkai Impact III. I wonder then if the world where gods can grant wishes refers to Teyvat then. Anyway, Sachi mentions that a new family moved into town, and Vera rushes off on her own to investigate. She enters the empty house, but a black-haired boy with glasses suddenly jumps out of the cupboards, followed by a blue slime with tentacles. He's yelling at an unknown invisible figure named Tal as he grabs an axe. Thus began the biggest crisis of Vera's life. Volume 2. My backyard is slightly bigger than the entire universe. We learn that the black-haired boy is named Ike as he hands Vera a kitchen knife for defense. They frantically try to fend off the demon slime and close the cupboard, and Vera just accidentally stabs Ike in the back twice? Anyway, but he can heal and they succeed, so it's okay. Ike then drops a nuclear bomb of information, including that he's over 1,000 years old, the slime was an old one, the cupboard can take you anywhere in the universe, and Ike accidentally let it in while he was just on a little trip into another galaxy. He's wiping slime goo off his glasses with Vera's dress and casually asks Vera, any questions? And Vera's like, nah, I'm good. But who's Tal? Ike explains that Tal is an evil spirit from a man-devouring castle, but it now serves Ike. I guess that makes him one hell of a butler. At this point, Ike says some cryptic word salad about how the human soul is too young, and he must guide them through the wonder of childhood on their long journey to youth. Let's just put a little mental pin in this for now. Sachi, who is content with his quiet life, scoffs at this notion, saying that any place in the universe is just as boring or exciting as his backyard. Ike responds saying, "The scale of everything follows my heart. Thus my heart is slightly bigger than the universe." And the volume's title, reflecting this, may give us another glimpse that Sachi's heart is here at home. Volume 3. The Man Who Stole the Lone Star. The Andromeda Empire stretches across half the galaxy group, and each planet has its own demons and deities and dragons. We're introduced to a new character, the Princess Androbasilisk, the second rightful heir to the Andromeda Empire. This is the princess I mentioned in the beginning. She's come to Delphi to marry Ike for political or safety reasons. She responds to Vera's question about the size of the empire, which is more than 9,000 inhabitable planets. And Vera thinks to herself, with so many stars in your possession, why come to steal my brilliance? Meanwhile, Sachi is grilling Ike about Vera. Ike asserts that she'd be a great assistant, and Ike senses that Sachi may have feelings for his hometown friend. Ike, for some reason, carries around a big box of photos of his exes, who claimed he was their true love, but he was really just one of many. I guess he did this to illustrate that he's not really interested in pursuing another relationship, but Sachi is not impressed with this weird flex and blurts out, "With so many stars in your possession, why come to steal my brilliance?" So here we're set up with a love triangle, or I guess a love square. Volume 4, All That Glitters. Vera is now looking at Ike's weird ex-girlfriend photo box and remarks that they're all pretty. Ike's like, "Yeah, I wouldn't save their pictures if they weren't." The author makes a note that yeah, he's blunt, because he's old and knows girls were hurt very easily. But I'd say maybe they aren't easy to hurt, and maybe you're just a jerk, Ike. Huh? Ever think about that, huh, Ike? Anyway, Ike makes another cryptic comment about making star-shaped jewelry to remember his exes, but the stars themselves can't be stolen or owned. He seems to be referencing Sachi's foolish passion and says humans are too young to understand. Meanwhile, Sachi is confronting the princess, saying he'd be the ombudsman between her and Ike because he loves Vera. The princess tells him to "shut up, idiot," because he's a cowardly worm and she considers Vera her friend. Volume 5, Roadside Picnic. Ike, being a tired old man, takes a nap. Meanwhile, his servants, consisting of conquered gods and demons, have an epic war in a test of strength, and destroy 3 stars in just 2 hours. For some reason, Sachi, Vera, and the princess are also involved in this battle royale. The princess isn't a god or demon, but definitely something weird though. The dominant race of the Andromeda Empire look, I guess, human, but actually have, lamprey hands. They have mouths on their hands. They use these lamprey hand mouths to eat eyeballs, and not just in battle, but also the bedroom. So the princess is eating demon eyeballs in this battle royale, and at the same time casually having an argument based on a misunderstanding with Vera. Meanwhile, Sachi is getting his ass beat by a dragon. But the princess eats its eyeballs, and Sachi gets yeeted to the high heavens. Sachi decides to wake Ike up with a slipper, and the princess goes on yet another tirade about how Sachi is lowly scum and a cowardly, ignorant worm. Before I move on, as a quick reminder, this is technically a Genshin Impact lore video. Technically. Volume 6, For Every Season. It's the festival episode. There's a town festival in Delphi, and Vera hosts the princess and Ike to visit and experience it. While they're eating, Vera bores the princess with the history of the village of Delphi, which mentions a brave knight named Huffman and a witch from the east who is also the imperial sage who crossed the land of Nether to get there. Ike doesn't care either, only commenting on a trivial geographical detail. Is that Delphi is on the other side of the world from the king's capital. At some point, Vera realizes that home is where the heart is, and she starts crying. She does this right in front of Sachi, and the princess interprets this as Sachi making Vera cry. So the princess kicks his shit in. Volume 7, Galaxy Wars. At the edges of the universe, habitable planets are few and far between, so space pirates and captains reign supreme. There's a lot of story missing between this volume and the last, because we jump to Ike addressing an entire galaxy. He says he was invited by the High Saint King Lebanon to reignite a few stars. Problem is, the Andromeda Empire doesn't want that, and would rather the inhabitants of the galaxy to perish. So much so, in fact, that they captured the princess and Sachi to force Ike to not reignite the stars. The Saint King is like, well, that's ridiculous. And she defeats the Andromeda assassins and saves the day. Ike is like, wow, you're strong. No wonder you beat that holy dragon. And the Saint King is like, actually, I am the holy dragon. I fused with Lebanon when she defeated me, and now I serve her. Ike's like, huh, that's a little shocking. The Saint King then comments on how the princess seems fond of Sachi because she barged in on them doing something together. Ike's like, excuse me, what? This was more shocking to him than the Holy Dragon fusion thing. So the love square gets a little more complicated. Volume 8. The Girls Themselves. So the girls are having a slumber party tonight, and it's going to be Vera, the princess, the High Saint King. Oh, and also who is the alpha female of the Galactic Swarm. If you want to come, we're going to be painting our nails, maybe share some gossip. Oh, but no boys allowed. Meanwhile, the boys are reporting back to each other, and Sachi is trying to explain what happened. They weren't like smooching or anything. The princess was simply trying to eat Sachi. Ike's like, no, you misunderstand. The Andromeda race has lamprey mouth hands that they use to consume eyeballs. And Sachi is like, yes, I am aware she tried to eat my eyeball. And Ike's like, let me finish. Their practice of eating eyeballs has two different meanings. With the left eyeball, it's submission, but for the right, it's love. Sachi rubs his eyes, thinking about which one it was she tried to eat. Ike comments that she may not know the difference, and he wants to stay out of their succession wars and only help Sachi to support her. Sachi gets embarrassed because it's not like she likes him or anything. Volume 9. Death Awaits in Abyssal Waves. Vera and Sachi grow up, and the relationship between the four changed in subtle and inexplicable ways. Sachi confronts Ike. Enough with the excuses. Vera will never stop pursuing you, even if you never reciprocate. Ike points out that he's 1,000 years old, elderly, and way too old for Vera. The princess chimes in that she is also super old. Finally, the once cowardly Sachi gains the courage to declare his love to Vera. But of course, things go wrong. Apparently, when Ike and Vera first met, they received an ancient sword from the Old Ones, the tentacled slimes. Ike needed it to propel destiny forward. But Vera had unfortunately cut herself on it by accident, and an ancient malicious virus sapped the life out of her. Sachi and the princess are sent into a panic, begging Ike to do something, and if he can rewind time or something. Ike scolds them. Only the future can save the past, not the other way around. He continues by describing a myth of a Silver Age where people would enjoy a seemingly endless childhood, met by a very short but chaotic maturity. But to the others, childhood was long gone, but youth was forever beyond their reach. Volume 10. Vera's Melancholy. To revive Vera, Sachi, Ike, and the princess embarked on a spectacular and thrilling journey that lasted 20 years, from battling Signor Inferno to slaying the Star Devourer to rescuing 2 galaxies and the Galaxy Empire, and even eliminating 4 species of ruthless interstellar worms. They revive Vera, and Sachi is a far cry from the timid boy he once was, now a hero of cosmic proportions. He's tall and strapping, and also had lost an eye. Ike laments that he is but an echo of time, and reiterates that the past cannot change the future, for predetermined fate cannot be changed even by someone as old and powerful as he. But the future, with its infinite possibilities, could save the world. Ike transforms Sachi back into what he was 20 years ago, and time reversed itself to the day of their departure. Though everything seemed unchanged between the four, the innocence they shared was long gone. Ike apologizes to Sachi for depriving him of his childhood, and tells him that the youth he deserves awaits him. Sachi ends the story as he summons every last ounce of his courage while standing before the girl of his destiny. I have witnessed every wonder in the universe for your sake, and this was how my childhood ended. I will never reach my youth without you by my side. With that, the story ends as the author is living the high life from the money he made, and his publisher desperately wants him to write more. As I said, Vera's Melancholy is a tone shift from not just the game world, but also its other books. There seems to be no obvious metaphors or relations to anything in Genshin, from its stories to characters and even themes. Vera starts off as an imaginative, bored teenage girl, and Sachi her timid friend. They're led on a bunch of space adventures by old boy man Ike, who guides Sachi and Vera to grow by embracing childhood and youth. But sci-fi coming-of-age story doesn't resonate with the existing game. But here are a few things that stand out to me. Delphi. Delphi is the hometown of Vera and Sachi. It's notable for two very important reasons. The first is that the intro for Volume 9 of Vera's Melancholy explicitly calls Delphi the center of Greek mythology, which is a very unique reference to real life. To the ancient Greeks, Delphi was the center of the world and home to the most powerful oracle. In myth, Zeus sent two eagles from the western and eastern extremities of the world to find its center, the navel of Gaia, which ended up being Delphi. This seems to be reflected in the knight's and the witch's journey. The second reason is that in-game, Delphi is also the previous name for the serpent's heart in Enkanomiya. It is called the Land of Snakes, mentioned in the Byakuyokuku Chronicles. In Delphi, long before Ouroboros ruled, the imaginary scaleless serpent, Ouroboros, resided. Ouroboros is an ancient symbol of a snake devouring its own tail, often symbolizing cyclicity and birth and rebirth, and was also historically adopted into and widely used in Gnosticism and alchemy. To my knowledge, it doesn't have any other mention in-game, except for an oblique reference in Dainsleif's constellation, the Snake Ring. But speaking of Dainsleif, the future saves the past. Towards the end of Vera's Melancholy, Ike starts repeating the same sentiment over and over again. Predestined fate is too strong for the past to be changed. Only the future can save the past, not the other way around. The phrase, "the future saves the past," appears elsewhere. Before the game was released, Dainsleif's character card was revealed, with a message from a self-proclaimed prophet. But there's a phrase here translated by Hoyoverse that reads, "The future must atone for bygone mistakes." But looking at the original Chinese, I think it should read more along the lines of Ike's dialogue. As a disclaimer, I don't know or speak any Chinese, so perhaps it's entirely contextual, but I'll still stand by the fact that there's a repeated phrase or string of characters. And in the context of Vera's Melancholy, Ike's translation of "the future saves the past" makes the most sense, given the plot and dialogue of the book. Now, in terms of what this means and its significance, I feel like that could have a video on its own, but I'll briefly touch on this. In the Sumeru Archon quest, Scaramouche asks us if the past can be changed. Traveler hesitates but does not answer, thinking of Rukkhadevata's widespread memory deletion. At the end of the quest, a mysterious voice clarifies this by saying that fate is like a tree swaying, but not being displaced. They imply that whether by a cat or dog or squirrel, the end result is the same. This was echoed by Nahida earlier, who questioned Scaramouche, saying, "How does this feel that all your efforts basically meant nothing? You changed nothing." But this is in contrast to something we saw previously in Inazuma. In A's second story quest, A planted the seed of the sacred sakura tree 500 years in the past. she attributes this to a higher power, Easteroth, the god of moments. Now, the difference between Rukkhadevata's and Scaramouche's stories and the sacred sakura tree is that the former do not change the past, only the interpretation, while the latter actually did have an effect on the past. The former ones access Irminsul records of memories, whereas the sacred sakura seems to access something completely different, a chaotic time-space. Now, I may be completely off here, but my understanding and my impression is that Scaramouche wanted to basically do the reverse of the sacred sakura tree seed. He wanted to take whatever seed of his existence was there and remove it completely. But because they only accessed Irminsul memory, it was only the memory in the records that changed, but not the actual past. In contrast, A Second Story Quest reads more like one of my favorite movies. Now, bear with me with this next point. Have y'all seen Interstellar? Great movie, also technically a space opera. In Interstellar, the Earth is facing extinction, so a bunch of scientists and Matthew McConaughey go on a mission to save humanity, yada yada. Before this, his young daughter claims to see a ghost who seems to be writing prophetic messages. During the mission, Matthew McConaughey gets sucked into a black hole. He ends up entering a 5-dimensional tesseract where he can subtly interact with different points in time in the past. He deduces that this space was made by future humans to cross space-time to plant a seed in the past that would save the world. It's then revealed that he was actually the ghost from the beginning, planting the guiding prophetic messages and creating the plot and changing the trajectory of fate. This is all to say that we have a few examples of trying to change the past. With Scaramouche, this is an unsuccessful attempt because it only achieves some revisionism where people forget who Scaramouche is. But with the sacred sakura tree, the tree is physically there. Now, like I said, this topic could have an entire video on its own, but I guess what I want to suggest is that when Ike says the future saves the past, means that you have to be at the end result, knowing the different fates that can be predicted to actually go back and change things, instead of simply revising or deleting or changing things in Irminsul. Cosmic horror. Another thing that stands out to me is a little bit in the tinfoil hat territory. In Volume 1, Ike and Vera are attacked by an interdimensional blue slime with tentacles. Ike says that it is an old one from the Magellanic Cloud. Now, originally I had just dismissed this as a real-life space reference. But revisiting, I realized this may have been more intentional than I previously thought. In his novella, The Whisper of Darkness, which was an early foray into science fiction, author H.P. Lovecraft seems to imply that a character knows the origin of Cthulhu, an old one, and that it's from the Magellanic Clouds. For those of you who are new here, I made a video during patch 3.0 about the cosmic horror of the abyss. It breaks down the Lovecraftian references in Sumeru, and how basically the abyss is an eldritch abomination. Now, this is one singular reference to Lovecraftian horror, but in Volume 9, we learn that Ike and Vera received a sword from the old ones there. Ike needed it to propel destiny forward. However, Vera accidentally cuts herself on it and succumbs to an ancient virus. Interesting that it's also described as malicious, which implies sentience and intent. The wording also struck me because of something I previously said in my Legend of Dari video during patch 3.1, is that forbidden knowledge and related curses or Elazar withering seem to be different strains of a metaphorical virus. Keeping in mind my own interpretation, is the author implying then that Ike wanted to wield a weapon using abyssal powers? The Lovecraftian references are sparse, but that in itself could be a hint. Now, this is a heavily speculative stretch, so extra tinfoil hat warning. Vera and the gang go on all these epic, sometimes wacky adventures with teenage love triangles, and meanwhile, there are eldritch horrors in the background with this ancient malicious virus that saps life. This gives me the vibe of a threat undetected, and for a while now in Genshin, the Abyss hasn't felt like a threat. We even fixed the corrupted Irminsul problem relatively quickly, although at great costs of the deletion of Rukkhadevata. Yet the Abyss may have been at the heart of the War of the Second Throne, the fall of the lineage of Ormazd, Parviz, Ravan, and Shirye, the death of King Deshret, the cataclysm 500 years ago, and maybe other great calamities. And now we have a few lines that allude to an existential threat from the conflict between the stars in the Abyss. Khedive actually said this in the Chasm many patches ago, and now it's reflected in the words of the Goddess of Flowers in the Paradise Lost artifact set. On a final note, I think the use of the word youth is interesting. In our reading, we counted 4 uses. The word youth is used in contrast to childhood and innocence. I wonder then, is youth a code word? In this case, youth could be replaced by knowledge or destiny or even some other word or phrase. These are words that shouldn't be a red flag or have any reason to censor. So why the replacement? I'm unsure, and I have no answer right now, but I feel like this is worth paying attention to in the future and for future patches. So that's a summary of Vera's Melancholy and some things that stand out to me. As I said, this is not comprehensive, and there are plenty of things I skimmed over or even omitted. I mostly still wonder about the references to Delphi, serpents, and Ouroboros, and what, if any, connection this all has to Dainsleif, as well as the self-proclaimed prophet. Thank you for watching and listening. Please hit that like, subscribe, yada yada, notification bell button, whatever. I really appreciate all of you, and all of your comments, adding to my theories. Thank you for fueling all of my tinfoil hat theories. I also co-host a stream over at twitch.tv/owletdesu. So we talk story, character, lore. We also get pretty degenerate, so stop by if you want to. Anyway, thanks again so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys on the flip side.